Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy.
Melissa, can you double-check the dessert trays?
Jonas called out, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. When no response came, he glanced up from his work. Mel, the absence of his business partner's cheerful chatter was jarring. Jonas frowned, scanning the kitchen for her familiar form. A nagging feeling tugged at his gut. Melissa was never late, and certainly never missed a prep day before a big event. He reached for his phone, about to dial her number when it buzzed in his hand. An unknown number flashed on the screen.
Hello? Is this Jonas Hartley?
A crisp professional voice inquired.
Yes, speaking. Mr. Hartley, this is Nurse Thompson from Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about Melissa Chen. She's been in a car accident and...
The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jonas gripped the edge of the stainless steel counter, his knuckles turning white.
Is she okay?
Miss Chen is stable, but she's suffered a broken leg and some minor injuries. She's currently undergoing treatment and will need to stay in the hospital for a few days. Relief washed over Jonas, quickly followed by a wave of panic.
A few days? But we have the Langley event tomorrow night. It's our biggest client of the year.
There was a pause on the other end of the line.
I'm sorry, sir, but Miss Chen won't be able to work for at least a few weeks. She asked me to tell you she's terribly sorry and to check her notes for the event details.
Jonas thanked the nurse and hung up, his mind racing. The Langley event was a make-or-break opportunity for their fledgling catering business. Lady Mira Langley was a socialite known for her extravagant parties and influential guest list. If they pulled this off, it could lead to a flood of high-profile clients. But Melissa was the face of their operation, the charming hostess who sweet-talked the clients while Jonas worked his magic in the kitchen. How could he possibly manage both roles? He paced the kitchen, running his hands through his dark curls. The clock on the wall seemed to mock him, its ticking a countdown to disaster. Then his eyes fell on a framed photo of him and Melissa from their culinary school graduation. They were both grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders. Melissa looked radiant in her white chef's uniform, her long black hair pulled back in a neat bun. A wild idea began to take shape in Jonas's mind. It was crazy, utterly insane, but it just might work. He grabbed his keys and raced out of the kitchen, leaving the half-prepared appetizers behind. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic lights and honking horns. Jonas's heart pounded in his chest as he rehearsed what he was going to say. At the hospital, he found Melissa propped up in bed, her leg encased in a bulky cast. Her face lit up when she saw him, though her smile was tinged with pain and worry. "Jonas, I'm so sorry about the event. I know how important it is, and..." He held up a hand to stop her.
Don't worry about that right now. How are you feeling?
Melissa grimaced.
Like I got hit by a truck. Oh wait, I did.
Her attempt at humor fell flat as she saw the concern etched on Jonas's face.
I'll be fine, really. But the event... I have an idea,
Jonas blurted out.
It's completely crazy, but hear me out.
He outlined his plan, watching as Melissa's eyes grew wider with each word. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment.
You want to dress up as me?
She finally said, her voice a mix of disbelief and amusement. Jonas nodded, his cheeks flushing.
I know it sounds insane, but think about it. We're about the same height, and with the right clothes and makeup, I could pull it off. Just long enough to get through the event.
Melissa studied him, her brow furrowed in thought. You'd really do that? For the business?
For us,
Jonas said softly. We've worked too hard to let this opportunity slip away. A slow smile spread across Melissa's face.
Well, if you're going to do this, you'll need some help. Let me make a few calls.
The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Melissa's sister, a professional makeup artist, arrived with an arsenal of cosmetics and a determination to transform Jonas into a passable facsimile of her sibling. A friend who worked in theater brought over a selection of wigs and helped Jonas practice walking in heels. As the hour of the event approached, Jonas stood before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing himself. The black cocktail dress hugged his newly padded curves, while expertly applied makeup softened his features. A long, dark wig cascaded over his shoulders in gentle waves. "Well, hello there, Jonah," he murmured to his reflection, trying out the feminine version of his name they'd decided on. The drive to the Langley estate was nerve-wracking. Jonas's palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, and he had to constantly remind himself not to smudge his makeup. As he pulled up to the grand mansion, its windows ablaze with light, he took a deep breath. "You can do this," he whispered, channeling Melissa's confidence. "Just smile, be charming, and don't trip over your own feet." The moment he stepped into the opulent foyer, Jonas was swept into a sea of glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. He plastered on his best approximation of Melissa's warm smile and began to mingle, praying that his voice wouldn't betray him. To his surprise and relief, most of the guests seemed too caught up in their own conversations to pay much attention to him. He flitted from group to group, making sure the servers were circulating properly and fielding compliments on the hors d'oeuvres. It wasn't until he bumped into Kate Holloway, a sharp-eyed journalist known for her gossip column, that Jonas felt his first real moment of panic. "Melissa, darling," Kate exclaimed, air-kissing his cheeks. "You look different somehow. New diet?" Jonas forced a laugh, pitching his voice higher.
"Oh, you know how it is. Always trying to keep up with the latest trends."
Kate's eyes narrowed slightly, and Jonas felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. But before she could press further, a hush fell over the room as Lady Mira Langley made her entrance. She was a vision in emerald green, her silver hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Her gaze swept the room, finally landing on Jonas. With a graceful gesture, she beckoned him over. Heart-pounding, Jonas made his way through the crowd. He could feel Kate's eyes boring into his back. "Melissa, my dear," Lady Mira said warmly, taking his hands in hers. "The food is absolutely divine. You've outdone yourself." Jonas felt a flush of pride beneath his layers of foundation.
"Thank you, Lady Mira. We aim to please." As they chatted, Jonas found himself relaxing into the role. Lady Mira was charming and witty, and he found himself genuinely enjoying their conversation. For a moment, he almost forgot the precariousness of his situation. But reality came crashing back as Kate sidled up to them, a predatory gleam in her eye. "Lady Mira, I hate to interrupt, but I think there's something you should know about your caterer," Kate said, her voice dripping with false concern. Jonas felt his stomach drop. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Kate reached out and gave his wig a sharp tug. It didn't come off entirely, but it shifted enough to reveal a glimpse of Jonas's own short hair underneath. A gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Jonas stood frozen, mortification washing over him in waves. But then, to everyone's surprise, Lady Mira burst out laughing. "Oh, my dear boy," she said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "You must be Jonas. Melissa told me all about your little scheme when she called to apologize for not being able to make it."
Jonas gaped at her, utterly dumbfounded. You knew?" Lady Mira patted his cheek affectionately. "Of course I did. And I must say, I admire your dedication. It takes a special kind of person to go to such lengths for their business partner." She turned to address the stunned onlookers. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for Jonas Hartley, the man behind tonight's exquisite cuisine and, it seems, a rather convincing Melissa impersonator." The room erupted in applause and laughter. Even Kate looked begrudgingly impressed. As the party resumed its lively atmosphere, Lady Mira drew Jonas aside. "Now then, my dear, why don't you go freshen up and come back as yourself? I'd love to hear more about your culinary creations, and perhaps discuss some future events." Jonas nodded gratefully and made his escape to the powder room. As he carefully removed the wig and began wiping away the layers of makeup, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. Despite the smeared lipstick and mascara-streaked cheeks, he was grinning from ear to ear. When he emerged a short while later, back in his own clothes with his face scrubbed clean, he felt a newfound sense of confidence. The guests greeted him with warm smiles and congratulations on his cooking, many expressing admiration for his earlier performance. Lady Mira found him by the dessert table, sampling one of his own creations. "Ah, Jonas," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I must say, you clean up rather nicely, though I did enjoy Jonah's company as well." Jonas felt a blush creep up his neck. "Thank you, Lady Mira, and thank you for being so understanding about the whole situation." She waved a hand dismissively. "My dear, I've been to far too many boring parties in my life. Your little masquerade was the most entertainment I've had in years." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Besides, I've always had a soft spot for men who aren't afraid to embrace their feminine side." Their eyes met, and Jonas felt a spark of electricity pass between them. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we could discuss those future events over dinner sometime? Just the two of us?" Jonas's heart skipped a beat. "I'd like that very much, Lady Mira." As the party wound down and the last of the guests departed, Jonas found himself lingering in the Langley Mansion's grand foyer. Lady Mira approached, a warm smile playing on her lips. "You've had quite the evening, haven't you?" she said, her voice low and rich. Jonas chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "That's putting it mildly. I don't think I've ever been so terrified and exhilarated at the same time." Lady Mira's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You handled it beautifully. Not many could have pulled off such a daring charade." "I still can't believe you knew the whole time," Jonas admitted. "Why didn't you say anything?" She shrugged elegantly. "I was curious to see how it would play out, and I must say, you make a rather fetching woman." Jonas felt heat rise to his cheeks. "I'm not sure about that. The heels were murder on my feet." Lady Mira laughed, a melodious sound that sent a pleasant shiver down Jonas's spine. "Practice makes perfect, my dear. Though I must admit, I find you equally charming in your current attire." Their eyes met, and Jonas felt that spark again, stronger this time. He cleared his throat. "About that dinner you mentioned." "Ah, yes," Lady Mira said, her smile widening. "I was thinking perhaps next Friday. There's a lovely little French bistro I know. Very private." Jonas nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Friday sounds perfect." As he gathered his catering equipment and prepared to leave, Lady Mira walked him to his van. The night air was cool and fragrant with the scent of blooming jasmine from her garden. "Jonas," she said, her tone suddenly serious, "I hope you know that your little adventure tonight doesn't change my opinion of you or your business. In fact, it's only increased my admiration." He turned to face her, touched by her words. "Thank you, Lady Mira. That means more than you know." She reached out and straightened his collar, her fingers lingering for a moment. "Until Friday, then?" "Until Friday," Jonas agreed, his pulse quickening at her touch. As he drove away from the Langley estate, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions and possibilities. The evening had taken so many unexpected turns, but somehow it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. The next morning, Jonas headed straight to the hospital, armed with a box of Melissa's favorite pastries and a detailed account of the previous night's events. He found her sitting up in bed, looking much better than she had the day before. "So," she asked eagerly as soon as he walked in, "how did it go? Did anyone suspect?" Jonas collapsed into the chair beside her bed with a dramatic sigh. "Oh, Mel, you're not going to believe what happened." He launched into the tale, watching as Melissa's expressions ranged from shock to amusement to disbelief. By the time he finished, she was laughing so hard that a nurse poked her head in to make sure everything was all right. "I can't believe Lady Mira knew the whole time," Melissa exclaimed, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "And now you have a date with her? Jonas Hartley, you dark horse!" Jonas flushed, fiddling with the edge of Melissa's blanket. "It's not,
I don't know if it's a date, exactly." Melissa fixed him with a knowing look. "Please, a private dinner at a French bistro? That's definitely a date." "Maybe," Jonas conceded. "But that's not even the craziest part. Mel, I think I might want to explore this whole cross-dressing thing a bit more." Melissa's eyebrows shot up. "Really? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but what brought this on?" Jonas leaned back in his chair, trying to put his feelings into words. "It's hard to explain. When I was dressed as Jonah, it was terrifying, yes, but also freeing in a way. Like I was accessing a part of myself I never knew existed." Melissa nodded slowly. "I can understand that. And hey, if it makes you happy and doesn't hurt anyone, why not explore it?" "You don't think it's weird?" Jonas asked, relief evident in his voice. "Jonas, honey, we live in a world where people eat Tide Pods for internet fame. You wanting to wear a dress occasionally is hardly the weirdest thing I've heard." They both burst out laughing, the tension broken. As their laughter subsided, Melissa reached out and squeezed Jonas's hand. "Seriously, though, I'm proud of you. Both for saving our business's reputation and for being brave enough to explore this new side of yourself." Jonas squeezed back, feeling a rush of affection for his friend and business partner. "Thanks, Mel. I couldn't have done it without you." As he left the hospital, Jonas felt lighter than he had in years. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities he'd never even considered before. He had a successful catering business, a potential new romance, and a whole new avenue of self-expression to explore. Humming softly to himself, he made a mental note to go shopping before his dinner with Lady Mira. After all, Jonah might want to make another appearance someday, and this time, she'd be ready. The week leading up to his dinner with Lady Mira passed in a blur of activity. Jonas threw himself into work, handling the increased volume of inquiries that had resulted from the successful Langley event. He visited Melissa daily, keeping her updated on the business and helping her plan her return to work. In quiet moments, however, his mind invariably drifted to thoughts of Lady Mira and their upcoming dinner. He found himself both excited and nervous, unsure of what to expect. Friday evening arrived, and Jonas stood before his closet, agonizing over what to wear. He'd briefly considered going as Jonah, but decided against it. This was a chance for Lady Mira to get to know him, the real him in all his complexity. He finally settled on a tailored charcoal suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and slim waist. As he knotted his tie, he caught sight of the shopping bag tucked in the corner of his room, containing a few carefully chosen items for Jonah. He smiled to himself, feeling a thrill of anticipation at the thought of exploring that side of himself further. The French bistro Lady Mira had chosen was indeed intimate, tucked away on a quiet side street. Soft jazz played in the background, and the warm glow of candlelight created a romantic atmosphere. Lady Mira was already seated when Jonas arrived, looking stunning in a deep purple wrap dress that highlighted her silver hair. She stood to greet him. "Jonas, darling, you look marvelous," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Thank you, Lady Mira," Jonas replied, suddenly feeling a bit tongue-tied. "You look absolutely beautiful." She waved a hand dismissively. "Please call me Mira. I think we're well past formalities, don't you?" As they settled into their seats, Jonas felt his nervousness begin to dissipate. Mira had a way of putting him at ease, her wit and charm drawing him out of his shell. They chatted easily as they perused the menu, discussing everything from the latest food trends to their favorite travel destinations. When the waiter came to take their order, Jonas was impressed by Mira's fluent French and impeccable pronunciation. "I spent a year in Paris in my youth," she explained, noticing his admiration. "It was a transformative experience." As they sipped their wine, Mira leaned forward, her expression turning more serious. "Jonas, I hope you know that I didn't ask you here out of mere curiosity about your escapade at my party." Jonas felt a flutter in his stomach. "Oh." Mira reached across the table, her hand coming to rest lightly on his. I find you utterly fascinating, my dear. Your talent, your dedication, your willingness to go to such lengths for your business partner. And yes, your openness to exploring different facets of yourself. Jonas swallowed hard, acutely aware of the warmth of her hand on his. I'm flattered, Mira. To be honest, I find you quite fascinating as well. Her smile widened. I'm glad to hear it. Now tell me, have you given any more thought to your experience as Jonah? Jonas nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and vulnerability as he opened up to her. I have, actually. It's something I think I'd like to explore further. In private, at least. Mira's eyes lit up with interest. How wonderful! I've always believed that true self-expression is one of life's greatest joys. If this is a path that calls to you, I encourage you to follow it. As their dinner progressed, Jonas found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, not even Melissa. Mira listened with genuine interest and understanding, offering insights from her own life experiences. By the time dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate souffle that they shared, Jonas felt as though he'd known Mira for years rather than days. There was an ease between them, a connection that transcended age and background. As they stepped out of the restaurant into the cool night air, Mira turned to face him. Jonas, I've had a lovely evening. So have I, he replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Mira reached up, her hand cupping his cheek gently. I'd very much like to see you again. Perhaps next time you could cook for me? I'd love to see the master at work in his own kitchen. Jonas leaned into her touch, his heart racing. I'd like that very much. She smiled, then leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his lips. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. Until next time, my dear. As Jonas watched her car pull away, he felt as though he was standing on the precipice of something monumental. His life had taken such an unexpected turn, and yet it felt utterly right. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Jonas. His business with Melissa continued to thrive, their reputation buoyed by the success of the Langley event. Melissa returned to work, her leg still in a cast, but her spirit as indomitable as ever. In his personal life, Jonas found himself navigating uncharted waters. His relationship with Mira deepened, each encounter leaving him more captivated than the last. They shared intimate dinners, long walks in her expansive gardens, and conversations that lasted into the early hours of the morning. Mira's acceptance and encouragement of his desire to explore crossdressing gave Jonas the confidence to delve further into this aspect of himself. He began to experiment more at home, learning to apply makeup with increasing skill and developing a keen eye for fashion that flattered his figure. One evening, as they sat in Mira's study enjoying a nightcap, Jonas mustered the courage to broach a subject that had been on his mind. Mira, he began, his voice slightly hesitant. I've been thinking, would you like to meet Jonah? Properly, I mean. Mira's eyes lit up with interest. My darling, I would be honored. And so, a week later, Jonas arrived at Mira's mansion not as himself, but as Jonah. He'd spent hours preparing, carefully applying makeup, donning a carefully chosen outfit, and styling his wig. When Mira opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Oh, Jonah, she breathed. You look absolutely stunning. Jonah felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Thank you, she said softly, still getting used to using a higher pitch. Mira took her hand, leading her inside. Come, let me look at you properly. As Mira circled her, taking in every detail, Jonah felt a surge of confidence. Here, in this space, with this remarkable woman, she felt truly seen and accepted. The evening that followed was one of the most memorable of Jonas's life. They dined, they danced, they laughed. Mira helped Jonah touch up her makeup and gave her tips on walking more naturally in heels. As the night drew to a close, Mira pulled Jonah close. Thank you for sharing this with me, she murmured. You are beautiful in every form, my dear. Jonah felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion she felt.
Thank you for accepting all of me, she whispered back. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.